Hi, this is a review of the Tom Bihn Aeronaut 45. It's a personal and business travel carry-on bag, one that I've used for a number of personal and business trips. This bag's been out for quite a while, and although the design has never really changed, there's been some subtle innovations and improvements to it. I actually have an older version and a newer version that I want to show the differences between it. Between this newer navy blue ballistic Aeronaut 45 and an older style black ballistic Aeronaut 45. So comparing the old and new, there's some subtle changes, but nothing that would set the bag particularly apart to say buy the new versus the old or vice versa. But they are subtle, and I think they are all improvements, and I'd like to show you what they are. What you notice in the older one that I have is it's slightly curved. It's got more of a barrel shape to it, whereas the cut of the new one, although I'm sure it's exactly the same or very, very similar, it just tends to hold a slightly flatter end, so a more boxy design, which personally, aesthetically, I prefer. I think there are probably cut to the fabric changes which just support that or accentuate it. I've just noticed, for example, here the cut of this piece of fabric just appears to be perhaps millimeters longer, and that could be contributing to the way the bag curves. One of the other changes, subtle again it may be, is that the position and orientation of the shoulder clips is very marginally different, from almost 90 degrees to about 45 degrees here. This one maybe just a little off 90 degrees to 45 degrees again. Makes really little difference because the shoulder strap rotates anyway, so it doesn't really matter what orientation the clip is on. Whilst we're on the edge here, it may be difficult to see, but there's actually, I'll maybe open the grab handles here. There's actually an extra seam which isn't on this bag here. So the newer one has this cut which has a kind of crescent shape here, and this one's flat. Actually, I've noticed this makes a bit of difference when the bag is empty, and that's because the fabric of the ballistic, or if you go for the Halcyon version, is quite floppy, and the lid, when it opens, and I'll just open it very quickly to show you. It can be quite floppy. This top panel doesn't stay open. It stays open, but it just flops around a little bit. Whereas with the new one, because there's an extra seam here, I think it just strengthens the bag slightly, so it doesn't flop down quite as easily. So it holds its shape marginally better. I'm sure you'd notice it more on the Halcyon fabric versus the ballistic. Some other changes to the outside of the bag. You've probably noticed the reversed zips with the AquaGuard on the outside here, whereas on the newer one they're the right side up zips, which I think still has the AquaGuard underneath. So you still get the waterproofing. Personally, I just prefer the look of the zip to the hidden zips. The zips themselves have changed just slightly. They look approximately the same size, so probably just as durable, but they have the kind of gunmetal color versus the black, which I think the black can scratch and expose a different color underneath with use, whereas I think the gunmetal will probably keep the colour and look of it longer. The other big change is that these are now lockable zippers. So we have lockable zippers on the main compartment and the two main end compartments. You can possibly see here they go together and you can put a padlock or tie through there, whereas the old ones don't. However, in use, of course, it is very easy just to put a small travel padlock through the ends of the zips for a measure of security when you're traveling. But the lockable zips are nice as an extra feature on the newer ones. The label as well is different. There's been a number of label changes over the years. This is an older Tom Bihn portable culture label, which I really like. And I'm super pleased now on the newer bags. They've gone back to the idea of portable culture, so since 1972, portable culture, which I think is a really nice statement and label on the bag. The other changes which are worth showing are on the ends of the bag. So on this end of the bag you can see that we have a zip pocket, whereas on this bag, if you can see, there is just an open pocket here, which I find really useful for newspapers, rolled up magazines, etc. But it's not a particularly secure pocket. Maybe a water bottle, for example, could go in there. It is nice to have another zipped pocket, of course, because it's just a little bit more usable and secure. On the other side, the zipped pockets remain on both. However, the orientation of the zips has changed from that way to that way. I haven't noticed any particular benefit of that, but it could be based on the way you carry it, whether that's easier to open when it's on your shoulder. So one further change, these bags are in the same orientation at the moment, so opening pocket here and here. When you lay them both down, you can see that the back panel has reversed. So whereas it's pointing this way with the opening at this end, on the older version, on the newer version, it's pointing that way. Again, I don't believe there's any specific benefit to that I've seen. It's possibly to do with the way it's cut and designed. What I have noticed though, and this is quite a big change and improvement, is the way that back panel is cut and shaped, which I will show you why it makes such a good and big difference. So the back panels here are slightly different shape. This one has the curve in quite a pronounced hourglass shape and then quite a flat bottom. The newer version isn't quite as cut inlaid, so the hourglass isn't as pronounced, it's still curved at the top. You'll probably notice there's a slight curve at the bottom here, which isn't here. And there's actually a piece of fabric which is no longer there. So the panel kind of just extends to where the old one used to be, more or less. And because it doesn't barrel as much at the end, as I mentioned earlier, you get a slightly flatter cut there. So what this means is you've actually got a larger padded panel. So it's not as narrow and it's slightly longer. The difference is about, let's work this out, about 24.5 centimeters to 28 in the middle there. And let's just look zip to end. About 43. And 48. So an extra 5 centimeters of padding down the back, more or less. So theoretically, that's going to give you a more comfortable carry. The other thing is the thickness of the padding has increased. I think it's 10 millimeters thick now, so quite a bit thicker than the older version. I'm not sure what it is, 5 or 6 millimeters perhaps. It does feel different. So what you get is a more comfortable back panel that's bigger, and because it's thicker, it's also a little bit more structured, so it keeps the shape of the bag. As I said, this can be quite floppy, whereas this one's got a bit more stability to it. Marginal, but a change. Also, you can actually unzip and take out the padding from the Aeronaut if you want to make it lighter. I don't believe that's something worth doing, but if you're going ultralight, that could be helpful to you. And I guess if you take the padding out, this pocket can also be a little bit bigger. And this is where I wanted to show one of the main benefits of the change of design. So in the past, when I've travelled with an Aeronaut 45, one of the complaints or criticisms perhaps is carrying a laptop. One of the benefits of the back panels is you can use them as a pocket should you wish. So although they have the backpack straps in them, which you can obviously connect, it is a pocket, zippable pocket in its own right. And in the past, what I've found is that carrying a 13-inch laptop, and this is just a cache for a 13-inch empty, what I found is when you try to put that into the Aeronaut 45, it's just a little too narrow for the 13-inch cache. And this is a horizontal one. I think the vertical is the same. It's just a little bit too narrow. And if you had the Aeronaut 30, which is even smaller, that just definitely wouldn't work. But because this is a wider finish, what I've noticed is that the cache fits right in there. That extra few centimeters wide actually means that you can use that as a laptop compartment. And it's got more padding because it's got the thicker back panel as well. So whereas before for business travel, carrying a laptop, there was criticism of the Aeronaut 45, I think the changes to the back panel have pretty much eradicated that for me. Now you have a really, really practical, functional laptop space in there for a 13-inch laptop or smaller. The last change I wanted to show you was inside the bag. They have changed the way that the bag expands inside, and you can see already just how floppy this is. Now this is ballistic that has obviously been worn in and used for a number of years, but look just how floppy that flap is, especially when you've got a little bit of weight in the mesh pocket at the top. There's no structure in this part here. Whereas in the new one, that extra seam we talked about earlier just gives it a tiny bit more flexibility. You can see immediately how it just holds the shape a little bit better, making it easier to get in and out of the bag. But the change I wanted to show you, if you can see here in the light, is that these expandable side pockets have changed from being poppers, which allow the bag to expand, to the zips here, which allow the inside pocket to expand. In all honesty, I don't think there's any practical benefit. Perhaps I would say the zip's just a tiny bit easier to do than the poppers, but I don't believe makes a significant change. And actually there was one further thing. The new version has these grab handles, so when the bag is open you can kind of lift it and shift it around a hotel room, whereas the old one doesn't. But again, nice to have, not a deal breaker for me. So yes, those are the main differences between the old and newer Aeronaut 45. The Aeronaut 30 is a smaller version of the 45, so has the same kind of features and changes. I don't believe the Aeronaut 30 was out long enough ago to have the older style. So if you buy an Aeronaut 30, you're going to get the newer features, whether you buy that second-hand, used or brand new, obviously. So those are the main differences. If there's any questions you've got or anything you'd like to know more about the Aeronaut 45, please just put your questions in the comments below. Thanks for watching.